Meet Emma, young, vibrant, and full of life. Her dream had always been to marry the love of her life, Alex. They had been together for years, and everything about their relationship felt perfect. Emma had always been the kind of person who gave her heart fully to those she loved, and that included her best friend, Sarah. They had known each other since childhood, had shared secrets, laughter, and even tears. Sarah was not just her best friend, she was her sister, the one person Emma thought would always have her back. Little did Emma know, the trust she had placed in Sarah would soon be shattered in a way she never saw coming. For Emma, everything was falling into place. Her wedding day was just around the corner. She could almost feel the satin of her dress against her skin, the sweet scent of roses in the air, and the love of her life standing at the altar waiting for her. Planning her wedding had been a dream come true, but Emma wasn't doing it alone. No, Sarah was there every step of the way, just like Emma had always imagined. From choosing the flowers to tasting the cake, it was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a time for new beginnings and lifelong memories. Emma had always trusted Sarah implicitly. After all, Sarah was the one who had been by her side through thick and thin, who had been her rock when life got tough. The two of them had spent countless hours chatting about their futures, their dreams, and of course, their weddings. It seemed like there was nothing that could ruin this perfect moment in Emma's life. But there was something Emma couldn't shake, a feeling deep in her gut that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. As the final days before the wedding crept closer, the excitement that once filled Emma's heart began to feel a little off. It was small things at first. Sarah's lack of enthusiasm when they talked about the final details, the way she would avoid Emma's eyes when they discussed the finances. Emma couldn't place it, but something felt wrong. Maybe it was just nerves, she thought. Maybe she was overthinking everything, as brides tend to do. But the lingering doubt grew stronger each day. It all seemed too perfect, too smooth, as if everything was falling into place without a single hitch. Yet, in the back of Emma's mind, the sense that something was just not right kept gnawing at her. Why hadn't Sarah been responding to texts as quickly? Why had she been acting so distant during their last few wedding planning sessions? Emma brushed it off, telling herself it was probably nothing. But then came the day that changed everything. The final wedding payment was due, and Emma asked Sarah to send the details of the wedding fund. She trusted Sarah to handle it, just like she had trusted her with everything else. But when Emma took a look at the bank statements, her stomach dropped. The numbers didn't add up. The wedding fund, her wedding fund, had been drained. It was all gone. For a moment, Emma couldn't breathe. She stared at the screen, her mind trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Could it be a mistake? A glitch? But no, the money had been transferred, every penny, into an account that didn't belong to her. The sinking feeling in her chest was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah, the one person Emma had trusted most in the world, had stolen from her. Her best friend, her confidant, had betrayed her in the worst possible way. The world around Emma seemed to tilt. She couldn't move. She couldn't think straight. It was like her worst nightmare was unfolding right in front of her. But this was real. This wasn't a dream. And it was happening to her. How could Sarah, the one person who had been there for her, do this? The wedding they had spent months planning, the memories they had built, everything felt like it was crumbling around her. It was more than just a betrayal of money. It was the betrayal of a friendship that had lasted years. Emma felt numb, her heart racing, as the full weight of what Sarah had done started to sink in. This wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, love, and years of shared moments that now felt like a lie. And with that realization came another. This wasn't just about catching Sarah in the act. Emma knew she couldn't let this slide. No, she was going to make Sarah face the truth, and she was going to do it in a way that no one would ever forget. At first, it was small things that didn't seem like much at the time, but in hindsight, were the beginning of something much bigger. Emma noticed that Sarah, her best friend, was acting distant. At first, she brushed it off, telling herself that wedding planning was stressful and maybe Sarah just needed a little break. But as the days went by, it became harder to ignore. Sarah stopped showing up for dress fittings and wasn't responding to texts as quickly as she used to. Whenever Emma tried to bring up details about the wedding fund, Sarah would get a little too quiet, almost like she was hiding something. Emma tried to laugh it off. Maybe she's just busy, she thought. Maybe she's overwhelmed, just like I am. But something in her gut kept telling her this was more than just stress. When the wedding bills started coming in, Emma thought it was normal, until she noticed the totals were higher than expected. She double-checked the budget, trying to make sense of it. That's when she realized Sarah had been unusually secretive about the costs. Every time Emma asked her for an update on the fund, there was always an excuse. I'm waiting on some payments to clear, or I'll check with the vendors later. The delays, the excuses, they were starting to feel like red flags, and they were making Emma uneasy. Her thoughts were racing. Could Sarah be hiding something? Was it possible that the person she trusted most in the world was keeping secrets from her? But Emma wasn't sure, and she didn't want to jump to conclusions. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Deep down, she knew the truth would eventually come to light, but she didn't know how or when. The suspicion grew over the next few days, eating away at Emma from the inside out. Her mind wouldn't stop. What if Sarah was taking money from the wedding fund? Emma wondered. The thought was almost too painful to entertain, but she couldn't deny the signs. She had always trusted Sarah, trusted her like a sister. But now, as the questions piled up and the answers remained elusive, Emma started to do something she hadn't done before. She began digging deeper. She went through the wedding receipts, the invoices, the bank statements, anything she could find that might shed light on what was happening. And there it was. She found it on a rainy afternoon, just as the storm outside matched the storm brewing in her chest. There, in black and white, was a transaction that made Emma's heart stop. Thousands of dollars had been transferred to an unknown account. Her wedding fund, their wedding fund, was gone. She stared at the screen in shock, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Her best friend, the person who had promised to be there for her, the one who was supposed to be the most trusted person in her life, had betrayed her. The money was gone. And what hurt even more than the stolen funds was the realization that Sarah had planned it all without a second thought. It wasn't just about money. It was about the trust Emma had placed in her, a trust that had now been broken beyond repair. For a moment, Emma couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what was happening. She had always believed that the bond between her and Sarah was unbreakable, that nothing could tear them apart. But now, she was left with nothing but betrayal and an empty bank account. Her wedding, the dream she had worked so hard for, was crumbling before her eyes. And it wasn't just the money that was lost. It was the friendship, the years of shared memories, the moments she thought would last forever. And for what? For money? For something that didn't even belong to Sarah? Emma's mind raced. Anger, disbelief, sadness, they all flooded her at once, making her head spin. How could Sarah have done this? How could someone she loved and trusted with her entire heart betray her so completely? There was no answer. Not yet. All Emma knew was that she couldn't stay quiet. She had to confront Sarah. She had to make her face what she had done. But first, Emma needed time to gather herself. This was the beginning of the end. Emma's hands were shaking as she stared at her phone. The silence in the room was deafening, almost as if the walls were closing in on her. She knew what she had to do, but every part of her screamed to avoid it. This confrontation would change everything. It would break the trust that had existed for years. But there was no turning back. The betrayal was too deep, and the anger burning inside her was too much to hold in any longer. With a shaky breath, she dialed Sarah's number. The call rang through, each passing second building the tension inside Emma's chest. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, almost as if it were mocking her for the situation she found herself in. "Come on, pick up," she muttered under her breath. When the phone finally clicked, Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Hello?" Sarah's voice came through, casual, as if nothing was wrong, as if everything was still okay. "We need to talk," Emma said, her voice calm but firm. The words felt strange coming from her lips. She had always been the one to share everything with Sarah, to laugh, to cry, to confide in her. But now, this simple phrase seemed like the beginning of the end. There was a pause on the other end, and Emma could almost hear Sarah's hesitation. "What's going on, Em?" Sarah asked, her voice edged with concern, but Emma wasn't buying it. She knew better now. "Meet me at the cafe at 3. We need to talk about everything," Emma replied, her grip tightening on the phone. Her mind was already racing, preparing for what was coming. When the clock finally struck 3, Emma arrived at the cafe early, taking a seat by the window. Her fingers drummed nervously on the table, her mind spinning in circles. She was about to face Sarah, the person she had trusted with everything, her secrets, her dreams, and her future. But now it wasn't just a conversation, it was the truth, and it was going to hurt. The bell above the door jingled as Sarah walked in. She was her usual self, confident, carefree, as if everything was perfectly normal. But the moment their eyes met, the atmosphere shifted. The tension was palpable, thick in the air. Emma felt it in her bones, the weight of what was coming. Sarah sat down across from her, flashing a small smile. But Emma wasn't fooled by the act. "Hey, Em, what's going on?" Sarah asked, folding her hands in front of her. Emma took a deep breath, fighting the surge of emotions threatening to spill over. She had always thought that when the moment came, she would be calm, collected, unshakable. But right now, every part of her wanted to scream, to let the anger explode. Still, she held it together. "How could you do this to me?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The hurt in her words was clear, but it was the anger underneath that cut deeper. She leaned in slightly, locking eyes with Sarah. "How could you steal from me? From my wedding fund?" Sarah's face faltered, just for a moment, before she composed herself. The mask was slipping, and Emma saw it. The guilt in Sarah's eyes, the faintest twitch of uncertainty. But then, Sarah tried to cover it up, smiling, as if nothing was wrong. Emma, I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah said, her voice too light, too dismissive. Emma's heart raced, her hands clenched into fists under the table. She wasn't going to let Sarah lie her way out of this. She leaned in closer, her voice shaking with a mixture of pain and fury. Don't lie to me, Sarah. I've seen the bank statements. I know what you've done. You took my money, my wedding fund, the one I trusted you with. You stole from me, Sarah. The words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Sarah's face went pale, and for the first time, Emma saw the cracks in her best friend's facade. The guilt was written all over her face now. She couldn't hide it anymore. Emma, please, let me explain. Sarah started, but Emma interrupted her. No, you don't get to explain. You did this. You took my money and you betrayed me. All those years of friendship and you just threw it all away for what? For what, Sarah? Sarah's eyes dropped to the table. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. She was trapped. The reality of what she had done hit her hard, and there was no escaping it. Finally, Sarah exhaled a shaky breath and looked up, her eyes filled with something Emma hadn't expected: regret. But it was too little, too late. I didn't think it would matter, Sarah muttered, barely above a whisper. Her eyes avoided Emma's, focusing on her hands. You have everything, Emma. You've always had everything. I've always been the one left behind. I didn't have what you had, and it felt like I was losing everything. Emma blinked, a mix of confusion and disbelief flooding her mind. So you took my money because you felt left behind? She asked, her voice trembling. I didn't think you'd miss it. You have everything. Alex, the wedding, the life you've always wanted, Sarah said, her voice cracking. I didn't know what else to do. I was jealous, okay? I was jealous of everything you had, and I thought, maybe if I took some of it, I'd feel whole. Emma stared at her, the hurt consuming her. She couldn't process it all at once. The betrayal was deeper than she had ever imagined, and the reasoning didn't make it any easier to bear. You should have come to me, Sarah, Emma said, her voice quiet now, the anger giving way to sadness. You should have told me what you were feeling instead of doing this, instead of stealing from me, from someone who trusted you. For the first time in their entire friendship, Sarah didn't have anything left to say. The days after the confrontation felt like a blur to Emma. The weight of betrayal crushed her with each passing moment. It wasn't just the loss of money. It was the loss of someone she had considered family, someone who had been there for her through all the good and bad times. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moments with Sarah, their laughter, their inside jokes, the late-night talks about their hopes and dreams. But now, all of that felt like a lie. Emma was broken-hearted. The bond she thought was unbreakable had snapped in an instant. And the worst part? She wasn't sure who to trust anymore. How could someone who had known her better than anyone else do something so cruel? And if Sarah, the person who had always been by her side, could betray her like this, what did that say about the rest of the world? Her fiancé, Alex, couldn't understand why Sarah had done this. He tried to console her, but the more Emma cried, the more the walls between them seemed to grow. He was angry too, but his anger wasn't just for Sarah, it was for Emma. He hated seeing her in pain, and it hurt him that she was struggling to understand why this happened. Every time they tried to talk about the wedding, Emma couldn't. shake the feeling that everything had been tainted by Sarah's betrayal. The wedding wasn't just a celebration anymore. It had become a reminder of the person she trusted most, the one who had failed her in the worst way. Alex wanted to fix everything. He wanted to make it right, to take the pain away. But Emma couldn't even find the words to explain how deep the hurt went. She wasn't sure how to move forward, how to look past what Sarah had done. And as the days passed, Emma began to realize something else. The betrayal wasn't just affecting her, it was slowly poisoning every relationship around her. The people closest to her were feeling the strain too. For years, Emma had shared her life with Sarah. They had been inseparable, growing up together, sharing everything from silly secrets to the deepest fears about the future. They had made plans to be there for each other no matter what. Sarah had been the one she trusted to help her plan the most important day of her life. And now, with the truth revealed, Emma couldn't help but ask herself, how could someone she considered family do something so cold, so calculated? The more she reflected on their years of friendship, the more the pain seemed to deepen. It wasn't just the money, it was the years of trust that had been built and shattered in a moment. Every shared memory now felt tainted by the knowledge that Sarah had betrayed her. The friendship that had once felt like a safe haven now felt like a wound that would never heal. How could she have missed the signs? How could she have been so blind to the fact that the person closest to her had been planning to hurt her all along? There were moments when Emma tried to reach out to Sarah, again to maybe salvage what was left of their bond. But each time she saw Sarah's face, all she could feel was the cold emptiness of betrayal. It was as though Sarah was a stranger now, someone she no longer recognized. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the anger and hurt would fade, a small part of her still mourned the loss of that friendship. How could she ever look at the past the same way again? As Emma grappled with her emotions, she couldn't ignore the strain it was putting on her relationship with Alex. He had been nothing but supportive throughout their relationship, and now he was trying to figure out where he fit into this mess. Emma didn't have all the answers. She didn't know how to move past what Sarah had done, or how to forgive someone who had shattered her world. And in the midst of her own pain, she could see that Alex was struggling too. He had always been the one to ground her, to make her feel safe and loved. But now, his frustration and concern were building up. Why hadn't he seen the warning signs? Were there moments he missed? Was he not paying attention? Emma could feel the cracks starting to form in their relationship, the tension mounting. With each unanswered question, Alex had his own doubts now, questioning everything they had built together, and that was the last thing Emma needed. It wasn't just her relationship with Alex that was affected. Mutual friends, people who had known both Emma and Sarah, started pulling away. They didn't know how to react, how to offer support without taking sides. Some reached out to Emma, offering comfort while others distanced themselves, unsure of what to say. It wasn't just awkward. It was heartbreaking. Emma had never imagined that something as small as one betrayal could unravel everything. Friends, family, people she had trusted were now uncertain of where they stood. And Emma, in the midst of all this, felt more alone than ever before. Each conversation felt strained, filled with half-hearted words and unspoken tension. Emma began to wonder if she would ever be able to trust anyone the way she had trusted Sarah. How would she move on from this? Could she ever find her way back to the person she once was? Or would the scars of betrayal follow her, casting a shadow over every relationship she tried to rebuild? It was a question Emma couldn't answer yet. All she knew was that her life had been changed forever. And now, it was time to find a way to heal. Even if the path was unclear and filled with pain. The more Emma thought about it, the angrier she became. Every moment spent dwelling on Sarah's betrayal only fueled the fire inside her. She was done being a victim. No longer would she let Sarah's actions define her. Emma knew she couldn't undo what had happened, but she could take control. She would make sure that Sarah faced the consequences of what she had done, and no amount of guilt or regret would stop Emma from getting justice. For so long, Emma had trusted Sarah with everything: the wedding, her dreams, her life. Now Sarah had taken all of that and shattered it. But Emma wasn't going to let this go unanswered. The stolen money, the broken trust, the ruined relationship. Sarah had to pay for all of it. And Emma wasn't about to let it slide. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. It was about regaining what was taken from her, about exposing Sarah for what she truly was. Her mind raced with plans. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. She wasn't going to let Sarah walk away unscathed. Emma would take back what was rightfully hers, and she would make sure Sarah faced the full weight of her betrayal. But to do that, Emma needed to be smart. She needed to gather evidence, build a case, and get everything she could to expose Sarah for what she had done. Emma started researching. She spent hours poring over every bank statement, every receipt, every detail Sarah had given her over the months of wedding planning. She made calls, tracked down information, and reached out to people who could help her uncover the full extent of Sarah's actions. Little by little, Emma pieced together the puzzle. The more she uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Sarah had stolen from her not once, but multiple times. And every step Sarah had taken to cover her tracks only made Emma more determined. She reached out to a close friend who worked in finance, asking for help in tracking down the stolen funds. With her assistance, Emma found out exactly where the money had gone, into an account that Sarah had opened under a fake name. It was a chilling discovery, but it gave Emma the ammunition she needed. The plan was starting to come together, and Emma's resolve grew stronger with each passing day. She wasn't just going to get her money back. She was going to make sure Sarah paid for her actions, and everyone would know the truth. As the plan began to take shape, Emma realized she couldn't do this alone. She needed more than just information. She needed witnesses, people who could corroborate her story and back her up when the time came. She contacted a few mutual friends who had been involved in the wedding planning, asking them if they had noticed anything strange or suspicious about Sarah's behavior. Some of them were hesitant at first, not wanting to get involved in the drama, but others were more than willing to help. They had seen the way Sarah had acted and knew Emma's suspicions weren't unfounded. By the time everything was set in motion, Emma had everything she needed: the stolen funds, the proof of Sarah's deceit, and the testimonies of those who had seen Sarah's betrayal firsthand. It was time to put her plan into action. The day of the confrontation was finally here. Emma had arranged a meeting with Sarah, but this time, it wasn't just the two of them. She had invited a few key witnesses to be there, people who would be able to back up her claims and make sure Sarah couldn't talk her way out of it. Emma's hands were steady as she gathered the evidence: bank statements, messages, even photographs of the wedding vendors Sarah had secretly been in contact with. Everything was in place. Sarah walked in, her usual confidence in place, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but she held her composure. This was her moment. She wasn't going to let Sarah get away with this. I'm glad you came, Emma said coolly as Sarah sat down. There was no warmth in her voice, no friendly gesture. The tension between them was thick, almost suffocating. Sarah looked confused, but she didn't suspect what was coming. Emma didn't waste time with pleasantries. I know what you did, Sarah. I know you've been stealing from me, and I've got the proof. She slid the documents across the table, watching as Sarah's face went pale. I trusted you with everything, and you betrayed me. You took my money, lied to my face, and ruined everything I worked for. And now you're going to answer for it. Sarah's eyes darted around the room, the shock on her face evident. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Emma could see her best friend struggling, trying to come up with an excuse, but there was nothing left to say. The truth was out, and Sarah could no longer hide behind the lies. One by one, the witnesses Emma had gathered spoke up, confirming what Emma had already uncovered. They explained how they had seen Sarah act suspiciously, how they had witnessed her covering her tracks, and how they had suspected something wasn't right. The walls Sarah had carefully built around herself crumbled in an instant, and she was left exposed with no defense. The room was silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Sarah sat there, her face a mixture of disbelief and shame. She had never imagined that the truth would come out like this, that Emma would be so prepared, so relentless in her pursuit of justice. I don't know what to say, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. I never thought it would go this far. I never thought you'd find out. Emma's gaze didn't waver. You should have thought about that before you decided to betray me, before you took something that wasn't yours. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Sarah's world had collapsed, and Emma felt a strange sense of satisfaction. The road to revenge had been long and painful, but now, as Sarah sat there, caught in her own lies, Emma knew she had done what was right. She had taken control, and she had exposed the truth. The plan had worked. The betrayal had been revealed. And as Emma walked away from that meeting, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't the same person she was before. Sarah had taken something from her, but in the end, Emma had taken everything back. The moment Emma decided to expose Sarah's betrayal to everyone else was one she would never forget. She had already gathered the evidence, witnessed by those who knew the truth, and now it was time to reveal it all. Emma had invited a group of friends, those who had been closest to both her and Sarah, to a small gathering. It was supposed to be a reunion, a chance to mend the damage that had been done. But instead, it would be the moment that would change everything for Sarah. When Sarah walked into the room, she had no idea what was coming. She wore her usual confident smile, but as soon as Emma stood up and laid the evidence on the table, the air in the room shifted. The faces of their friends began to change. The truth was unfolding before their eyes, and the silence that followed was deafening. Emma didn't waste a single word. She calmly and methodically laid out everything: bank, statements, screenshots of the transfers, and testimonies from those who had seen Sarah's secretive actions. As she spoke, Sarah's face slowly drained of color. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but every excuse was met with a piece of hard evidence, every lie exposed for what it was. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes darting around the room, desperately, looking for someone to defend her. But there was no one left. The room was filled with disappointment, betrayal, and shock, and the realization that Sarah had manipulated them all was settling in. Her world began to unravel, and she realized too late that she had underestimated Emma. She had thought she could get away with it, that she could steal, lie, and walk away unscathed. But now, in front of everyone, Sarah was trapped, and she couldn't hide anymore. The silence hung heavy in the air as the last of Sarah's friends turned their backs on her. The damage was done. Her reputation, her standing, everything she had worked for, was in tatters. There was no turning back. And all the while, Emma stood there, calm and composed, finally giving Sarah the justice she had deserved all along. The fallout from the betrayal was swift and unforgiving. Sarah's reputation was ruined. The people she had once called friends turned their backs on her, refusing to even speak to her. Some of her family members tried to defend her at first, but as the full extent of her actions came to light, even they couldn't excuse what she had done. The guilt weighed heavily on Sarah, and the realization that she had thrown away everything for greed consumed her. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry messages, people expressing their disgust at her behavior. Her life, once full of promise and friendship, now lay in ruins. The business deals she had worked hard for were pulled out from under her, and no one trusted her anymore. She was alone, and the cold reality of her betrayal hit her harder than anything else. As for Emma, the journey she had been through was far from over, but she had come out stronger than ever. The emotional scars would take time to heal, but she was no longer the victim. She had reclaimed her life, her future, and her peace. The road to healing had just begun, but now Emma was in control of her own destiny. No longer defined by Sarah's betrayal, she was moving forward, leaving behind the wreckage of the past. And for the first time in a long time, Emma could breathe again. Free from the weight of the lies, free from the deceit, and free to live her life on her own terms.